Okay, let's get right into this. Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're unpacking a situation that's, let's be honest, probably everyone's worst nightmare. It is the ultimate modern-day David versus Goliath scenario, a homeowner deciding to take on their homeowners association. If you've ever lived in a planned community, you already know the tension, right? The HOA holds this immense power over your property, your paint colors, and especially your wallet. But what actually happens when a homeowner decides they've had enough, takes them to court, and tries to land a knockout punch? Well, as we're about to see, the legal system has some surprisingly strict rules about where and exactly how that battle can be fought.
So how exactly do you beat your HOA? I mean, it's a question millions of frustrated homeowners have frantically searched online at 2 in the morning. Is it enough to just be right? Do you just need to prove that they broke the rules? Today we're diving into a fascinating real-world legal order from an Office of Administrative Hearings that proves having the moral high ground and even getting the HOA to straight up admit they were wrong is honestly only half the battle. The real secret to beating your HOA, or at least just surviving the fight, comes down to understanding the strict rules of legal engagement. Because if you don't know the boundaries of the battlefield, there's no way you can win the war.
To figure this out, we're looking at a real-life legal case from 2007. We've got our combatants laid out right here. On one side, we have our homeowner, the petitioner, Paul Horton. And on the other side, we have the respondent, the incredibly named Rainbow Cove at the Shores Owners Association, represented by statutory agent Doris Morin. This whole thing was handled by administrative law judge Louis D. Kowal in the state of Arizona. It's that classic, relatable setup, one guy standing up against the massive bureaucratic machinery of his neighborhood association. Let's see how his attack actually plays out.
All right, let's jump right into part 1, the admitted violation.
Okay, so let's look at the opening moves of this legal chess match. And I've got to say, what happens here is absolutely wild. Right out of the gate, Rainbow Cove files a motion, and they just admit they broke the law. Specifically, they admit to violating an Arizona statute regarding how a planned community's board of directors is supposed to conduct its meetings. In the legal world, getting the opposing side to fold immediately and say, "Yep, you caught us, we broke that rule," is incredibly rare. It feels like a massive instant victory for our homeowner. But as we're about to learn, winning a quick battle doesn't mean the war is over.
Let's back up for a second and look at what actually kicked this whole thing off. Horton's initial complaint in his petition was that Rainbow Cove had hired and paid attorneys in a way that completely went against Arizona law and mandated procedures. Basically, Horton realized the HOA was shelling out money for lawyers, and he was convinced they bypassed a proper legal channels to do it. Now, the HOA did admit they messed up the specific meeting procedures. But here's the thing. Horton wasn't just mad about a procedural hiccup, he was really upset about the money itself.
And this is where things take a major turn. Horton clearly wanted to fight about the actual amount of money being spent on these lawyers, but the judge immediately shuts that down. He drops a footnote right near the beginning, making it crystal clear. The actual amount of the legal fees is not an issue he is legally allowed to look at. The judge literally does not care if the lawyers cost $10 or $10,000. He's only looking at whether the specific actions taken violated the specific laws Horton cited.
Which brings us to Section 2, the limits of power.
So Horton gets that quick win on the meeting procedures, but he decides to push his luck. He wasn't satisfied with just a procedural win. He wanted to throw the absolute book at them. He launches this super aggressive barrage of additional statutes, claiming violations of Title X laws, specifically targeting conflicts of interest among the board of directors. Horton was actively trying to pin down the individual people sitting on the board for having conflicts of interest when they hired these attorneys. It's a really bold strategy, going after the individual humans rather than just the HOA entity.
But to understand why Horton's grand strategy hits a massive legal brick wall, we have to talk about one extremely important word: jurisdiction. Jurisdiction is simply the official power to make legal decisions and judgments. For our explainer today, think of jurisdiction as the boundaries of the battlefield. If you step outside those boundaries, the judge literally cannot help you, no matter how right you are. Horton is fighting this in the Office of Administrative Hearings, and this specific venue has incredibly tight jurisdictional rules. Judge Kowal actually highlights this limitation perfectly. He cites a 1983 legal precedent, Ayala v. Hill. Let me translate that dense legal jargon for you. The judge is essentially saying, look, I'm not a king. I don't have some absolute inherent power to just wave a wand and fix everything that feels unfair. I only have the specific powers that the state legislature explicitly handed to me in the rulebook. Nothing more. It's an absolutely crucial lesson. You have to know the limits of your referee.
This creates a really stark contrast for what happens next. The judge basically separates things into a yes pile and a no pile. He can rule on whether the association at large violated community documents or specific parts of Arizona Title 33. That's what he's allowed to do. But on the flip side, he explicitly states the tribunal completely lacks authority over Title 10 violations. So all those extra claims Horton threw in, completely tossed out. The judge can't even look at them. But what about going after the board members for conflicts of interest?
Here is the fatal flaw in Horton's attack. The judge points out a very specific rule, A.R.S. 41-2198.01b, which dictates that this specific tribunal only handles disputes between a homeowner and the association as a whole. It absolutely does not have jurisdiction over disputes with individual board members. Because Horton's conflict of interest claims pertain to the individual members, the judge's hands were completely tied. You can sue the corporate entity of the HOA in this venue, for sure, but you cannot legally target the actual human beings sitting on the board.
And that brings us to Section 3, the final verdict.
So, with the battlefield firmly defined, how does a judge actually wrap this up? Well, because the HOA immediately admitted fault on the main issue and the judge had zero jurisdiction over everything else, there was literally nothing left to argue about. So Judge Cowell does a rapid-fire wrap-up. He grants summary judgment based on the HOA's admission. Because there's nothing left to decide, he concludes no evidentiary hearing or trial is required. And finally, he just vacates the matter from the docket entirely. Case closed.
So what is the actual official punishment for the HOA? The judge issues a mandate ordering Rainbow Cove to comply with the state statute when conducting its board meetings. In essence, it is a legal piece of paper that says, hey, you admitted you broke the meeting rules. Make sure you don't do it again. It just forces them to play by the proper rules going forward. It's basically a procedural slap on the wrist.
But what about the financial side of things? The judge does issue one final order to make the homeowner whole for starting the process. Rainbow Cove is ordered to reimburse Paul Horton exactly $550 for his filing fee, to be paid within 40 days. And that's it. That is the exact financial payout Horton wins at the end of this entire battle. He doesn't get a ruling on the lawyer fees. He doesn't get to punish the individual board members. He just gets his initial entry fee handed back to him.
Which leaves us with this final, really provocative question. Did Paul Horton actually win? I mean, on paper, yes. He caught his HOA breaking the law, got them to legally admit it, got the judge to order them to behave, and even got his $550 back. But when you look back at everything he originally wanted, he wanted accountability for the money spent and the people spending it. Instead, he slammed right into the invisible wall of jurisdiction. It brilliantly shows that, in the legal world, justice isn't just about who's right and who's wrong. It's about whether you're in the right room, asking the right referee under the right rulebook. So, next time you think about taking on a Goliath of your own, ask yourself, do you truly know the boundaries of your battlefield? Thanks for joining me on The Explainer.